Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.
That's right. Welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad. My name's Dave Momper. I'm your host. This is a fatherhood podcast for new dads and soon-to-be dads. I'm a new dad myself, and I'm asking every day, great dads, what does it take? What does it truly take to take on the ultimate role? All right, let's get to it. Mr. Donny Dust, welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad.
Thank you so much for having me. It's quite the honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, honor's all mine. The pleasure's all mine. I love your background. For those listening and not watching, you're missing an incredible amount of story and context. But for those watching, Donny Dust, the professional caveman, I've come to learn about your story.
Yeah.
Donny, you and I love how you and I know each other. I feel like I've known you forever in a way, but we're new friends. But we
Yes.
had the good fortune through a crowd of people at a Joe Rogan show in 2021, I believe it was. And I'm like,
Yep.
there's Donny Dust. Fist bump over a bunch of people, just like really didn't say much. Instagram lets us connect. Years later, I'm a new dad. Reach out to you with some visions of bringing some interesting experiences to fathers, survival, wilderness adventures, so forth. And I'm like, Donny Dust. There's got to be something there. And it turns out you've got a 15-year-old, you've got an 18-year-old, two young men, legends in the making. And
Absolutely.
here we are chatting. So thanks for making time for me.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I think this is absolutely great. I mean, I've been watching the episodes, and ever since our interactions at Rogan, I think it's because we're both over 6 foot, so we could see over a crowd of short
Right.
people and lay that fist bump in. But yeah, man, I'm super excited to be here. I think this is a great podcast, and it's an honor to be part of it, especially to focus on a really key role in this world today, what it is to be a father, and all the little lessons that you can learn from new fathers, experienced fathers. It's just a great opportunity, and I think it's a resource that I'm going to share with the world, and I know people are going to really resonate with, especially dads, and more importantly, even some moms out there too, because can't be a good dad without having a great mom.
Yeah, no doubt. Amen. And let me introduce a little bit of your background, and then I want you to just tell us more, right? But you have such a great story, uh, and I just picture all the lessons, even if you weren't a father, all the lessons you have that you can bestow on other people. We could even do a non-fatherhood podcast, rich with all good stuff. But your whole world, your whole profession, your whole heart and soul is about living wild. Okay. So I want to hear more about that. I
Living
know you
wild.
were historically in the Marine Corps, but once a Marine, always a Marine. So there's that. You have a survival school here in Colorado that takes you all over the country, maybe all over the world. You've been on TV shows and you've been interviewed by probably, who knows, just all sorts of interesting characters to bring some wisdom about living in a minimalist way, learning from nature, and that might explain your vibe, the background, and so forth. So, just tell us a little bit about how did you get to where you're at right now in a few stories.
Yeah. Well, I think the main way I got to where I am now is that I took my own advice. I didn't listen to anybody else that said you can't, you shouldn't, you'll never be successful. And I listened to myself, and I progressed through a lot of hard work and time to running my own business, being a father, having different books and TV shows and movies, and pretty much just doing what I wanted to do because it brought me an aspect of peace. But it all kind of started with, a love of the outdoors. I'm 44 years old. I just confirmed that yesterday with Marissa, because once we get over 40, sometimes we forget. Are we 43, 44? But yeah, I grew up in the outdoors before, cell phones and YouTube and computers, and spent my time fishing and building forts and hunting. And I just had this passion for the outdoors, and it gave me kind of like a place of comfort. It gave me a place of peace, and I never really wanted to leave that environment. And going through, elementary school, middle school, and then eventually into high school, I always found myself returning to the woods and really wanting to dive into the cultures of the past. How did they survive? How did they thrive? What were those key factors that brought them from, struggling every day to get a bit of food to ultimately creating works of art around the world? And, at that time, college wasn't my choice. So Uncle Sam came a calling, and I joined the United States Marine Corps. And my primary job when I was in the Marine Corps was a counterintelligence, human intelligence agent. So I spent a lot of time deployed overseas, and this is all pre 9/11. And then when 9/11 kicked off, I was in the Corps and found myself deployed many times in combat zones in very nefarious locations. And and after a series of time, I was married, and I had given birth to my first son and then my second son. And right around 2011, I was non-deployable for the first time, meaning that I had done so many deployments kind of back to back to back. I was able to take this break. And it was during this break, I was still working in various ways, but I got to be the dad that I saw on TV, or that you would drive down the road and see a little league game going and dad's out there. And I got to participate in birthdays and holidays, and being an assistance coach to like Pee Wee soccer.
Hmm.
And I absolutely, loved it. I got to spend more time with them, going hiking and camping and just doing those dad roles. And I pretty much said, once my enlistment is up, I'm out of here. I'm focusing on me, my family, more importantly, my two sons. And once I, left the military, I kind of had this realization, actualization, that in order for me to be happy, I need to pursue my passions, which was the outdoors, and really start a business and dive deep into a lifestyle and a practice that I knew was going to be beneficial for me, and also give them a lot of different points of exposure. And yeah, I mean, it worked out. It was one of those things. Up until 2017, at the age of 37, I had a massive heart attack. My left anterior descending artery in my heart ruptured, and I kind of did a reevaluation on life. Prior to that heart attack, I was never on social media. I was very focused on a lot of specific things to be successful in kind of my field, if you will. And I had a conversation with someone. They're like, "You need to kind of come out of the proverbial primitive closet, if you will, and start sharing with the world." So I went on Instagram and created a YouTube channel and wrote my first book, Scavenger, which really highlights the heart attack and my points of recovery, which was moving out into the woods and living remotely and healing from the earth, eating wild and sleeping in grass beds and walking through the forest naked or in a loincloth, and just really connecting, and then coming back to the natural world to be with my sons, spending time with them, and then reconnecting. And I was able to heal in a very unconventional way, where everything today is tip top, so to speak. And from there, it's just been kind of a roller coaster, if you will, of experiences, from traveling to Africa to live with remote African tribes, to South America and the Amazon, the Arctic, you name it. There's a people and a place and a culture. I want to get to know them and learn about them. And sometimes my sons come with me on these adventures, and it's been great. It's no complaints at all.
Yeah. What a dream. What a journey. And the primal
Yeah.
ethos in your heart and mind. It's I'm definitely not as primal as you, but I love approaching it in a similar way. And you reading the book that you shared with me and talking to you a little bit, you've got me fired up to tap into some of these ways. So And I just, all that
Right on.
said, all that context, there's so many questions about fatherhood, but I want to start off with one in particular related to your your glimpse into death and being on the edge of
Yeah.
existence for was a few moments, a few hours. What did that how did that affect your perspective, your approach, and perhaps your attitude to fatherhood after the fact? What changed for you, or what did you realize that you maybe didn't realize prior to, specific to fatherhood?
Yeah, I think and that's a very fair question, and I thought about that quite a bit. I think my first kind of thought was that death is imminent. It is the one unifying factor in all of us, no matter your your race, your finances, where you live, anything. Death is our unifying factor. And when you accept the fact that one day you will expire and you will go to wherever you choose to go in your afterlife, but you know that to be a guaranteed thing, why do we wait to the end to have all those experiences or wish for those experiences that you could have had in the years prior? My scare and facing death, and keep in mind that wasn't the first time compared to, like, combat overseas, but this was in a controlled environment. I was at home in a loved place, but having that heart attack made me realize death is imminent. But knowing this, knowing how close you were to it, you can choose to kind of cower in the corner and live a life of prevention and worry and concern, or you can kind of take the bull by the horns and say, now you have two sons. Let me show you what it's like to be resilient. Let me show you what an aspect of adversity is and what you can do to overcome it. And it's the same thing I wrote in my book and that I preach to people and that I even told my sons. If anything, I was happy to be the example, because if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody, and you can overcome this. As a matter of fact, when I had my heart attack, I was 6 months into a training cycle for a super jungle ultra marathon on 245K down in South America over like 12 days, self supported. So I was in great fitness, great shape. But if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. So I took this moment and said, look, boys, even your worst day, that's just your worst day. You will get over it. This is my worst day right now. And right now, I'm getting over it day by day, minute by minute. And I think it gave them perspective to be, when they have those rough moments, whether it's, getting a bad grade on a test, or, letting somebody get by them in lacrosse, or not being able to complete a certain double black diamond on a snowboard, they get over it. I always tell them, like, you got to sack up and move forward. There's a little Marine Corps in me in there, and there's also that father that's saying, look, it can be worse. You'll be okay. Just keep going. So death is imminent, but knowing that, we can definitely enjoy the time now, enjoy every moment. And I live by this saying, and I tell a lot of people, you hear everyone say, oh man, life is short. And I refuse that. I say life is long. Life is absolutely long. And it's the best life and the most, adventurous life that you can make, because you get to make it. If you love the journey, the end spot is just the end spot. It's the journey that gets there. Life is very, very long. Enjoy it, embrace it. Watch a sunset, kiss a beautiful woman, have a cold beer, reflect on that first paycheck. When somebody gives you a high five because you scored a goal, you should be proud of that. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a long life.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm
Right
glad
on.
you made it through that.
Thanks,
For
man.
sure. And admittedly, that could not have been the first time you stared death in the face, knowing your background. I'm sure there was, and there is, story upon story of near death experiences. I'm curious about what it revealed to you that was worth revealing to your sons. I heard a few things, right?
Yeah.
Resilience, a
Mhm.
mindset of not defeat, but of perseverance, of overcoming. So I suppose, at large, you want to teach your kids and me and people around you to live wild. So let's
Yeah.
unpack that. But if for uh, for kiddos that you're raising and for other dads listening, what are the key attributes that you've been intending to bestow on your kiddos that, includes resilience and say perseverance? Are there other specific things where you're like, you know what, I want to make sure by the time, and I know one of your boys is just moments away from being 18 and going off into the world in a really special way. What other things are in their back pocket that you formally positioned for them, or that you formally granted them, or at least invited them to access?
Yeah, I think with my boys, I've given them what I call ground truth. This isn't just
Ground truth.
dad's advice. This isn't dad's best practices. I've given them ground truth. Ground truth is firsthand experiences. It's whether that experience is a hardship or unconditional love or something that's impacting them where they see something that is like, wow, that's overwhelming. So I give them ground truth, and ground truth comes in a lot of forms. Like my oldest is traveling overseas. I brought him to Central America, but we didn't go to a resort. We didn't go anywhere beautiful where you're getting mai tais and you're sitting under like an umbrella. We went into the heart of where the people are, and I wanted him to see what different portions of the world look like. So now he has built a ground truth that he can fall back on when he travels overseas. These are the taxis you take. Watch out for, things that take place at night. These places are, no-go establishments. You can run into trouble there. So that ground truth gives somebody their own lessons. It gives them their own personal experiences and perceptions to fall back on. When my boys were 7 and 9, I dragged them through the Utah desert, minimalist, one chow, but I wanted them to understand what it was like to be hungry, to be tired, to walk. And the hike we did was 27 miles, but
This
they
is the
gained an
Escalante.
aspect of ground truth.
Is that the
Yeah,
Escalante
down
that you're?
from Boulder,
Yep.
Utah.
Cool,
Yeah, the
cool, cool.
Escalante. Um, so I mean, that's some rough country for a 7 and 9 year old, and some parents might think, man, that's a little crazy, but they 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 learned an aspect of hardship. They learned an aspect of building their own resiliency when they are hungry, they are tired. More importantly, working as a team. So the ground truth I try to give them are the lessons and experiences that they can fall back on. So let's say my youngest son is playing lacrosse and he misses a shot. It's not the end of the world. He could think back in his mind, wow, this isn't as bad as the time that we had to walk from here to there, or when we had to go out and catch our fish with the locals in Central America. Otherwise, we weren't eating, or we walked through a jungle. It gives them perspective. I can ultimately control some of that ground truth, but then they get to build their own kind of personal experiences. They have experienced quite a bit, but there's always an aspect of love, patience, and understanding. And with my two boys, based on my experiences, I have one rule: they can't be me. There's no way, no how they ever get to be me. Because soon as a young, son looks at his father and they start to get that feeling like I need to do what dad does, or I'm expected to follow my father's footsteps, that's when they're not being themselves. They can experience, they can, trust me, they can butcher a bison and tan a hide and do a lot of these things, but they also get to be themselves. They have their own autonomy to make their own decisions. And I think from my experiences in life in the military, you're told what to do.
Mm.
Um, in that sort of thing, there's kind of a mission. There's a requirement there. And when I left that, I was able to kind of separate those two things. But ground truth is probably one of the most important things a parent can give, a father can give their children, is experience. It's the authentic form of real life. Like,
Yes.
you know if my son doesn't have a ride home from school, he jumps on the local bus from Boulder and drives all the way to Lafayette. Some parents would lose their mind, but I've done it with him. We've been in these sort of situations where he has experienced it. He's built up that confidence from a young age all the way up until now, and he goes, and it's nothing. It's just a normal day. It's
Right.
you build resilient children that way. If you shelter them and safeguard them against everything that you deem to be unsafe, then those kids are going to have a very difficult life growing up.
Right, right, right. Yeah, creating a safe environment for kids as though you could carry that on perpetually, that's not realistic. But can you build some grit and some tenacity and some resilience in
Right.
them? And I love that it's almost our duty as fathers to give our kiddos as many firsthand experiences as
Absolutely.
possible and a wide variety and a depth of experiences that then will teach them. We don't even have to name resilience to them. They just so but I still want to hear, what do you think are those characteristics that came about for your kiddos? And I'm just thinking of your oldest. You told me he's setting off to Europe uh, shortly after he graduates. He's got 4 languages in his belt: English, Spanish, French, Latin. Amazing
Yeah.
that he's equipped in that regard. But so he's got as a product of all this, he's got resilience. What else does he have that you feel like were key ingredients that
Yeah.
uh, that he you can be confident he's got X, Y, and Z. He's going to be good to go.
Yeah. He's adaptive. They're
Okay.
both adaptive. You can like I kind of like to look at animals. They can either migrate, you can hibernate, or you can adapt.
Mm.
And adaptation is the key for all forms of survival. And I think for my boys, having lived overseas, having moved multiple times, having parents that are divorced, um, there is an adaptation, and they can use that flexibility, that adaptation anywhere they go based on the environments and the situations they're proven to kind of thrive in. Um, Whatever my oldest son is projecting for his time that he's going to experience when he travels for the next year, every moment will be a form of adaptation. He might have the perfect plan, but as soon as he gets there, something could be wrong, something could have changed. He has to adapt on the fly. It's not like when I had my heart attack, I'm going to sit in my corner and cry and make myself, you know, build up this level of anxiety. You can sit in the corner or you can adapt and overcome and move on. So I think um, having resiliency, more importantly, being able to adapt is completely essential. Also, having your own autonomy, like being able to make your own decisions. And keep in mind, as children are younger, moving all the way up into young adults, they have to be able to make their own decisions. Parents can't be making every decision for your children. Some examples that I would use is when I would bring my sons to the doctor, I would not talk. They needed to be able to communicate with another adult, somebody in a professional form. They needed to be able to have control and a say over their body and in that given situation. Now, I might be in the room and the doctor comes and looks at me and wants to, hey, I want to give your sons a checkup. That's great, doc. This is William. He'll answer any questions that he has the ability to do that. Same thing with my youngest son, Alden. When they have their own autonomy, you build confidence, you build leadership, you build a sense of like, and not arrogance by any means, but truly confident. Like, okay, hey Dad, can I borrow the car to go to work? Hey, I need it. All right, I'm gonna walk. Like adaptation, confidence. His just go. He's got his own autonomy to make, hey, I'm going to work, these are the requirements that I have to do to achieve that sort of level of work. These are my choices. Hey, I'm going to take Friday off because I want to go hang with my friends. That's your choice. you know there's you got to give them the reins and let them ride that pony, if you know what I
Mm.
mean.
No doubt. Some agency goes a long way, and eventually they got to be
Yeah.
self-reliant and self-sufficient. So there's this book
Yeah.
I've been exploring called The Intentional Father,
Hmm.
and they pose this beautiful question. It's like, one day your sons or daughters will leave the house, and you will either drop them off somewhere and watch them go away, or they will drive away on their own or whatever. But what are you doing so that that moment is a beautiful moment versus a overwhelming moment of
Yeah.
anxiety and almost like hesitation? Instead,
Yeah.
are we queuing up these lessons and these attributes? And reading your book, I feel like this is almost the some of the foundational stuff in available in nature that they got to learn through these experiences, but that you're teaching people curiosity,
Oh,
creativity. Riddle on me with those a bit. Like how did you teach your kids curiosity and creativity? What did it look like as a father early on and maybe over the years?
yeah, I think curiosity has been my number one thing in life because I'm a curious person. And for me, being able to kind of, spark that curiosity fire inside them really started with us going out into the outdoors. And that's one aspect of it. And then it kind of transforms into art, into music, into all these kind of different, boxes or subjects, if you will. And when they had a question about something, it wasn't me supplying the answer. It was them discovering the answer because you can be curious a lot about everything and anything.
Cool.
But if someone is just quick to give you a version of that story or to give you a fact about it, you're diminishing that point of curiosity. And this obviously with age can be, kind of teach, coach, and mentored through that process. But when they're curious about something, I'm just like, well, we have the saying at our house, like GTS it, which means Google that shit.
Yeah, right, right.
I don't know if I could swear, but
Yeah, hit it up.
that's kind of yeah, that's kind of like our joke to be like, well, go figure it out. Go discover that kind of fact on your own. And how I was able to kind of build some of those kind of curiosity points in the outdoors with them was, how many times have you gone hiking with a little one and they get bored? Well, if you stick a handful of $5 grab bag of fossils in your pocket, you break down for a lunch, and you start stashing a couple little fossils, and you bring, hey guys, this is an ancient seabed. I know there's fossils. All right, and you find one. Next thing you know, they're scrounging everywhere looking for fossils. Then they want to know about the fossils, the landscape. You just light that little bit of fire, and you give them an opportunity to kind of dive deep into that kind of approach. And for somebody who makes tons of stone tools, I mean, that's another way you can go about doing it. But you can feed it. It's not um, really anything but like kind of going back to when you were a kid and always asking that question. Well, why? Why is that? How come? This, and like giving them the opportunity to learn some of those things on their own. And then from there, like my oldest boy is, I mean, when he lands in Portugal, he's got a loose plan. And the plan is like, well, I'm going to figure out the trains. I'm going to go hike these trails. I'm not sure what's over here, but I've heard it's kind of good. I'm going to go. He just wants to go figure it out, learn about it. He wants to eat some of the food. He loves cooking. So he is curious about the world. And for him, this is how he's going to go, and kind of crave that. And then when it comes to like creativity, creativity is our number one survival skill. Everything you see around you, we have created. And the root form of that is Mother Nature. Everything that we have needed as a species from 3.3 million years ago up until, Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, the various hominids that existed, it came from nature. And it gave us the ability to survive. And surviving is just getting by, but thriving is where you kind of move out of that getting by to creating art, creating comfort, creating things that don't don't really directly relate to your survival. And through that creative process is how you ultimately solve problems. So, as my young boys, when we lived in Colorado and we get a ton of snow, it's our job as men to shovel the driveway. And for them, it's like we see all this snow. How do we get rid of it the quickest? Well, as a dad, I put two Coca-Colas at the top of the driveway and say, hey, when you guys get to the top, we can have some Cokes. And they're already strategizing. What if we jumped on our bikes and taped snow shovels to it and try to do, they're just actively engaging with that given problem, trying to solve it. And that is a very good thing because as they are in that creative process, they're not realizing that they're going to be using that problem solving, that creative process all the way into the future. And that can go from planning an event with friends, planning a trip overseas, to creating something that they need, whether it's at home or in school or in a professional career some point. But creativity is everything. You can create everything you need from nothing. You just have to resources all the things around you, whether it's the natural environment, relationships, physical things. You can create from those and ultimately survive, and then move on to thrive.
Yes, indeed. I feel like the bridge between survival and thrival is creativity. And I love in reading some of your stuff, there was this notion that you can walk into the wild world
Yeah,
with nothing
zero.
and come back out of the wild world with everything you need.
That's it.
What does
That's
that
it.
actually look like? Give the listeners an example. And I know I read enough to know what an example might sound like, but I just love the idea of minimally going into the woods, being having the perception that you're totally vulnerable and less equipped than you could be with all the gear and gadgets and
Yeah,
$500 jackets and all that stuff.
yeah.
But it turns out everything you actually need, nature provides. So
That's
what?
it. Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I mean that's really one of the foundation stones I teach people from all around the world and my own sons that Mother Nature provides all, and what it provides is I like to say our mental, physical, emotional, and primal well-being. And like I have this tattoo on my hand with my 4 marks. Those are my 4 marks, and keeping those marks aligned allow me to kind of achieve those tasks of walking into the bush with nothing and walking out with everything. Um, when I think about nothing, it's kind of a simple analogy. Yeah, you could walk in and quickly walk out, but what are you really obtaining from a mental sort of gain, if you will? Did I go out there? Did I practice kind of self gratitude? Did I walk out into the bush? Because when we think of going into the bush, walking in with nothing and walking out with everything, we think of very physical stuff. And physical does exist. We can hunt animals and tan their hides and make clothing and make stone tools and shelters and fire. We can do all the survival stuff, but the thrival stuff is that mental, physical, emotional, primal well-being. What am I getting from an emotional connection out in this natural environment? Am I out here with somebody else, or am I out here by myself? Um, am I, knowing myself and seeking self-improvement? Those things draw people out there, and it is a kind of a return on investment. And when you go out there, you're like a canvas that's completely blank. When you're out there, you get to actually create that kind of work of art, whether it is in the form of a fire or some sort of stone tool, or the understanding that you created something from nothing, and taking that little bit of an opportunity, that little bit of a point of success, and say, how does this translate into modern world, or the practical world? It's something, or it's nothing, but really creating everything that you could possibly really imagine. I mean, we've been doing it for thousands of years, and you can do it today. But when you think about your mental, physical, emotional, and primal well-being and keeping those aligned, that is the biggest return when you walk out of those woods, because it's the easiest place to obtain all 4 of those.
And Donnie, I would imagine some people are going, well, I live in the big city or I don't have access to the woods, but I think we can do this in parks and other places that are, less hustle and bustle. Set aside that hustle and
Yeah,
bustle. But nature gives us a place to just be
yeah,
and create some stillness. And I grew up in the woods. I grew up in small town America, and my dad was a forester. It's like he never made it explicit about what that learning environment was, but it turns out I was just granted this amazing realm of lessons, and now I love just going into the woods and letting things slow down, and you get to soak up
yeah,
uh, the spirit of the woods, or you get a sensation of our innate connection to all of it, or you kind of get to actually
yeah,
feel the rawness of Mother Earth with your feet in the dirt, or just you know
yeah, yeah,
touching rocks and trees, and just listening, just being the observer.
yeah.
And there's something
I
healing there for sure that I think is so
yeah,
poetic. It's
I
neglected. It's so neglected. So how I don't know, what's your advice for
yeah,
the listener out there? How do you tap into nature
yeah,
if not in the middle of say the Escalante River system in Utah, 26 miles from nowhere.
Yeah.
What are some other ways to do that that still give us access?
Yeah. Well, I like to call that that environment. It has a pattern of life, and the pattern of life are the natural sounds and smells and just everything that is existing in that environment. A bird chirping, a river running, you name it, wind blowing through the trees, and that pattern of life exists everywhere. It exists at a comedy show. It exists at your local favorite restaurant, in nature, at a sporting game. And people have the ability to quickly adapt to different patterns of life, but the natural environment kind of poses the biggest issue. One is accessibility to that natural environment. And I say there's no real excuse for not taking time to heal oneself in the natural environment. And the natural environment can be a city park, a trail. It sounds crazy, but like anywhere where there is a natural place and the sounds and the smells, um, there's no excuse. I mean, I would like to say like this is your top tip to finding that place in the city. No, it doesn't exist. You have to leave that city. You have to leave that rural environment, or that kind of urban environment, and go to it. Like that's part of that journey, is saying, I'm not going to find it here. I might live in New York City. I could walk to Central Park, but I still hear sirens. I still hear this. I need to leave. And that is truly the only way to really, obtain that pattern of life. I would love there to be some sort of like, these are the top 3 things that you can do to obtain this, but it doesn't exist. The natural world exists. It is the purest form. It will not lie. It will not cheat. It will not steal. It expects nothing from you. It just is. So you can immerse yourself and become part of that pattern of life, or you can sit at a far, watching on a computer screen, or maybe catch it on Netflix, but that's not going to cut it. You have to get out there. Otherwise, I mean, nature heals. It heals.
It does. So it sounds like the advice, the takeaway is invest, commit to a personal walkabout, even if it's for a day, even if it's for a few
Yeah,
hours, and then
that's it.
uh, so fold that into your repertoire, one way or the other, somehow, some way, and then
You got to
can
go.
we can we also do that with our kiddos? Can we teach them to go bask in the rawness of nature? Because even if you don't know exactly what the lessons are, the lessons will present themselves, and that's going to
Absolutely.
be massive value add
Absolutely.
for our little ones as they're becoming,
Yeah.
attuned to what it means to be alive.
I think the natural environment is probably one of the funnest places for little kids to experience. There's dirt, there's puddles, there's streams, there's grass. There's so many different things there that they probably feel very much connected to that natural landscape more than adults do. There's probably a very innate thing as they're coming, out of the mother, and they're experiencing life for the first time when they are 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, that they're not afraid to go outside and rough and tumble and jump in a mud puddle. That's 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 important. We have to kind of foster that and continue that. Otherwise, as kids get older, they kind of lose it.
Yeah, no doubt. We're the modern world lures us into conformity, and if you're not early on
Yeah,
introducing the youngsters to the natural world, it's easy to neglect it, I suppose. So I want to zoom out. I want to kind of picture uh early on fatherhood for Donny Dust, and maybe even before
yeah,
you were a dad, your perception of becoming a father. What was that? What was your outlook? And it kind of, I'm wondering, what did it, or who gave you examples, or where did you learn examples of good fatherhood? Like where were those lessons for you as you were embarking on fatherhood? It's like, I want to be a good father. Where were those lessons, and what were your takeaways in the early days?
yeah. I think, yeah. My father was, the best example of how to be a father. And my grandfather, his dad, was an even, top example as well. Um, I learned very much what it was not to be a father, but more importantly, to be a man. You must be a man first, and then you can ultimately become a father. What it was to take care of a family and work, long hours, ensuring that everyone's needs were met. And more importantly, if there was an issue, maybe it was, a paycheck or something, that was, kind of perplexing at work, that wasn't brought home. Like, I think my father had this mentality that when he would come home from work, he would hang his briefcase and his jacket on the tree outside and leave that work outside so then he could come inside and be, a dad. And ultimately, he led by example. There wasn't many times or many things that he did not know how to do, whether it was building a deck, changing the garbage disposal, landscaping. And, with the help of my mom, I was able to, experience a lot of these things firsthand. They were the perfect example of parents. More importantly, my father gave me a lot of lessons. And one reason why is that I'm the only male in my family. I have two older sisters, and I was the youngest. So when it came to, cutting the grass and shoveling the driveway or doing those kind of man sort of responsibilities, those were pushed down to me very, very early on. I remember my folks would keep me home from school to help shovel rocks that we would get delivered so we could do our landscaping or bark mulch or to build a deck. And um, those were all good things when you think about it. Like, those gave me some knowledge, skills, and abilities. So they were the perfect example. There was continuous love. There was praise for accomplishments. More importantly, when I messed up, I was held accountable. I mean, there was no like, well, don't do it next time. I mean, that's one of the things is I don't think fathers should be friends. They should be fathers. You can't be friends with your children. You have to be a father. And when a father becomes more of a friend than that, I mean, kids are going to wind up disrespecting their friends. They'll disrespect their father. I'll never disrespect my father because he has proven to me time and time again what it is to be a man. More importantly, what it is to be a father. And I think as um, I kind of progressed into fatherhood or even becoming a father, um, I was kind of at a different place, a different time. With one son, being 18, this is 18 years ago. um, I was in the Marine Corps, training for battle, training for fighting. My first son was born, and 6 months later, I was deployed overseas. And I came back from, combat deployments in Iraq, and my son didn't know who I was. I mean, uh, my ex-wife couldn't go out for a run and leave me home with him because he would get scared. He didn't know who I was. So it was definitely trying, but I think I realized very early on that he's a little human being. He doesn't know certain things because I haven't been there to show him or to give him kind of that continuous kind of attention and love. I was fighting in a war. So it took time with my first son when he was very young to kind of build that kind of relationship that we had to get him to understand as a 1 year old that I'm your dad. I love you very much. And there's going to be things that we're going to do together. There's going to be things that you and your mom do together. And there's going to be things we all do together. But, you know, I'm your dad. I never took it personal. I never took it personal when a 1 year old or a 2 year old doesn't want to be around me because there's just an unfamiliarity there. I think a lot of parents can get frustrated by that and kind of go down different paths. Maybe it's drugs or alcohol or any number of things. But something, my father taught me, the military taught me was this is a child. I'm not going to take it personal that he's nervous around me. And obviously that changed, as I was around more. But, you do one deployment, you're home for 4 or 5 months, and then you deploy again. So there was kind of a reintroduction every single time. And as he got older, he ultimately, understood, who I was and what I was. But that was one of the key reasons why I wanted to leave the military, was I wanted to be around. I didn't want there to be kind of this stop and go sort of dad. I'm there and now I'm not there. And when my youngest son was born, he was born in Okinawa, Japan. Um, I delivered him actually. I kind of told the nurse, I was like, look, I've done a lot of cool things in my life. If that's what I think. I've never delivered a baby. I'd love to deliver this baby. And it's military doctor. So they're like, yeah, not a problem. Rolled up the sleeves,
Hmm.
did the whole crowning and cutting. And it was pretty amazing. But even with him, when we moved back to the States, um, I was still trying to figure out what it was to be a father. I didn't really know, because there's a lot of theories and guidance pushing these different ways. This is the sort of father you need to be. You need to do this, you need to do this, and you need to do this. And I quickly realized I'm not going to do any of those. Those kids are going to help me determine what sort of father I'm going to be. I know between my two sons, I know when my oldest boy comes home from school or work, we're going to sit down, because he wants to sit down and talk for 35, 45 minutes about the things he's done that day, the tests he's passed, or the amount of people that came into work. But that's what he needs from me. So as a responsive father, I respond to that same by sitting there and actively listening. I know when my youngest one comes home, I'm like, hey, how was school? It was awesome. Cool. That's his. He doesn't like to provide a lot. I can ask a couple questions, but he's different. They're two different young men, and I can't father them the exact same way. And I learned that when I finally moved back to the States, having two young boys at the time, that they were two different people. I can't apply the same formula to both of them. I had to kind of have, kind of a macro idea, but kind of understand the nuances of who they are and the things that they need, and kind of craft my fathering styles to them individually, as well as having kind of that macro concept.
And that yeah, it's like the awareness that that requires, and the thoughtfulness to say, well, I want to meet them where they're at. There's not one particular way of being a dad. I'm going to kind of customize it or tailor it. And it just struck me, similar to some of the things you talk about in your book and perhaps from the military. It's almost like situational awareness. Am I
Bingo.
attuned to my kiddos? I know what's possible and available in terms of like a skill set that I could leverage, or like an approach or a strategy, but it's not a one size fits all. Can I be attuned to the situation or to the kiddo and meet them where they're at? I mean, how do we
Exactly.
develop that as I'm I appreciate that conceptually. I've got a 7.5 month old. I don't know what for young dads, how do
Mhm.
you pay attention so that eventually you can authentically, sincerely meet them where they're at? Any thoughts of what I should be on the lookout for? Or,
Yeah, I mean, I think first, that awareness for me to kind of understand that conceptually really came from dealing with human sources. So as a counter intel guy, um, I'm I'm engaging with human beings, human intelligence assets, and every single one of them is different. And then from that, you're always writing reports and all sorts of paperwork, but I have to write stuff about myself and how I interact with that asset. And I realize that I'm not the same person with every single one of those people. They all have different needs, wants, and desires. And I need to supply them with the solutions, or I need to deny them of those solutions. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a framework with my two boys. And I think when I started to see them grow and they started to have their own individual interests, whether it was riding a bike or doing art or playing on this leap pad brain sort of stimulation thing, or throwing a lacrosse ball, and I understood and I saw their differences, it just gave me even more affirmation that they are different people. And it's it's with two boys, you have the ability to compare and contrast. With one child, that's the focal point, and like what is. But if a child shows an interest or a trait or a quality or something that is an identifier to them, um, how do I respond to that? How do I react to that from a parenting, or more importantly, a fatherhood sort of role. I know with my youngest, when it comes to school and academics, he doesn't care. I let him know that I care, but I also don't care. I'm very honest with him. But when it comes to sports, snowboarding, rock climbing, that's what he wants to talk about. That's his interest. Therefore, that is my interest as well. Same thing with my oldest in language and cooking and work. And that sort of interest levels have had many different spectrums from 3 all the way up into their current ages. So
Mm,
as they are interested in Star Wars for a period of time, well, let's talk about Star Wars. And they want to build a Star Wars pulley system in the backyard. Well, let's do this together. Let's be creative about it. How can we make a giant Angry Birds slingshot shooter for a birthday party? Well, let's figure it out. So it's one of them loves this, the other one hates it. And I think a lot of parents like to group their kids together because it's easy management. You all have soccer practice, you all have this, you all have dance or piano. And I think from a parenting and fatherhood sort of standpoint, I was like, I need to separate them and allow them to pursue their interests, but more importantly, reinforce those interests by kind of making them my own. Not like entirely, like my oldest boy, he loves doing all forms of like language. And I knew some Arabic and Tagalog and was able to express it, but like I'm not at the level where he's at. And he's maturing to a man. That's his approach. So it's kind of a funny thing, but overall I don't parent them the same way. I parent them as individuals. They also know that like um me as the dad, there's certain rules and requirements and stuff like that, but they also know that they get a different sort of parenting. My youngest needs more reinforcement when he has done something awesome. Like he needs high fives. Hey, dude, great job. You crushed it. You killed it. He wants to talk about it. My oldest is like, I got an A in a test. I'm like, oh, nice work. He's like, yeah. Anyway, I got work in about an hour. It's just different. And it takes time. You're not going to figure it out in the first year or 2 years. More importantly, the kids are figuring out. So as they're figuring life out, you get to kind of figure them out a little bit.
mm.
Once you start really verbalizing and kind of expressing interest here and expressing interest there, that's when you can kind of reinforce it.
As you're saying all that, I'm going, oh, I think the answer lies in something you've already covered. Like my duty right now is to just be curious about my little dude,
That's it. That's it.
and let him show up and meet him where he's at. And somehow there's this kind of discipline I feel like I'm gonna foster, hopefully, and execute, hopefully, well, which is to be intentional and
Yeah.
agendaless at the same time.
Yeah.
Somehow intentional and agendaless at the same time. And between now and then, and even beyond is curiosity. It's like
Yeah.
that's gonna
Yeah.
serve me nicely.
Yeah, man. It's the easiest thing to do when you really think about
It almost takes the pressure off in a way. You're like,
it.
okay, so
Yeah.
all I have to do is be curious.
That's it. That's
Yes.
it. Like your child, Leonidas, will provide you with all the answers. You just have to be curious and inquisitive and support it. And I mean, I could provide countless examples of my boys having an interest one day and then flipping that interest, and then just back and forth like this. And I think as a parent, that's just you need to accept that. But as soon as you tell a child, that's dumb, that's never going to work. Um, you kind of squash it. I know with my oldest boy, soon as you not challenge him, but soon as you start to kind of say, huh, that's interesting. Why are you going that route? He's wired. He's already thought about responses, the second and third order effects. He's very much in tune with that because I know at a very much younger age, he would say, Dad, I want to set up a lemonade stand. Okay, well, where are you going to get the lemonade? Well, you're going to provide it. Well, what's my cut? Like it's already kind of playing that. We have dad tax in the house. So he's kind of
Yeah.
already thought about those sort of things, and it's allowed him to kind of progress to where he's at now. My youngest one, he's very much the same, but between him and his brother, he's always the one that's willing to take the chance. His brother is like, I wonder what it'd be like if we drop pillowcases off the roof and see, timed how far these things fell. And he's a little bit more analytical. The younger one's like, I'll get the pillowcases. So there's a little bit of a balance there. And when you have to like, approach them, it's like, all right, William, I know this is their idea. Alden, why are you doing it? Why did you let your brother do it? And they just kind of do their thing. They're good boys. Good boys.
Awesome.
Fine young men.
Well, and I appreciate a father cannot be a friend at for the early years through young adulthood perhaps. But I think of my dad. My dad's one of my best buddies, and my
Yeah.
mom's one of my greatest friends. They're my confidants. I can't wait to hear how they think of you. Like, another 10 years from now, the shift. I wonder at what point would you be comfortable being more friend than father? What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. When I say that I'm not designed to be their friend, I think friends can come and go. Friends can do a lot of different things to, you when you're in that friendship. So I want them to understand that my role as a father is to provide them with certain resources and more importantly, prepare them for the lives that they choose. It's a way, it's not necessarily the way, but at a certain point, we'll have a friendship. And I believe that friendship will exist when they are out on their own, they're making their own decisions, they're living their own life, and a call is made, a letter is written, or you get together for kind of an event, and it's a catch up. Hey, what have you been up to? It's been a long time. I feel like that's where it's a friendship, and that's where I don't want it to go, because then it's a loss. It's not saying that I'm going to be in their business 24/7, but like I want to maintain the relationship with my sons and not be like, yeah, I don't talk to them all that much. It's more like a friendship than it is. I view it as a very negative term
Mm,
because I don't want it to fall into that sort of like, um, I don't know what they're doing. Not because I'm saying, hey, what are you doing? But they don't call me or I call them, be like, hey, what's going on? Merce and I are going here. Where are you at? Oh, you're in Australia. All right, we're going to be in Queensland. Let's link up. I want it to be a continuous growing relationship that is father and son. And even when they're 34, and I'm like, that's a bad idea. They're like, yeah, that's dad coming out. It's not like, well, look, you're 34, you make that decision. I'm always going to be their father.
hmm
I'm not always going to be their friend.
Yeah, good call. That's a good distinction. I'll
It's,
always be their father.
I don't know. Like, I'll give you
I'm just acknowledging,
yeah, never
you'll
be their
always
friend.
be their
But I
father,
always,
but
I
I
use
won't always be their friend. Yeah, that's good.
exactly, exactly. Like with my two boys as they've gotten older, I've kind of cussed, gave them kind of a new kind of outlook on certain things. There's the invite and there's the request. So
Ah,
two things, two very different things. If I say, knock on the doors and say, hey, it's 6:30 in the morning, let's go shovel the driveway. That's not an invite. I'm not saying, hey, I could really use your help. They know their butts are out there shoveling the driveway. And if I stop halfway through, start shoveling the back of the house, they're not gonna be like, Dad, I thought they just know that's what they're gonna do. An invite is like, hey, Mercer and I are gonna go grab a bite. If you guys want to join us, you're more than welcome. And I think they have the choice to make, hey, we want to, go out to eat or we don't. They also know that if they don't go out to eat, then they are on their own. And from a very young age, not young age, I'd say probably as soon as they kind of got to 10, 11, and 12, I started to employ the invite and the request. There's plenty of requests. Go in the backyard, pick up the dog crap, or hey, we're thinking about going away on this weekend. What do you guys want to do? What's your inputs? And it gives young men and it gives fathers an opportunity to kind of hear the reasoning and the kind of concepts and how their kids want to go about executing a dinner, a task, a weekend trip, whatever. So one of our trips to Central America, I'm like, where do you guys want to go for summer for 2 weeks? And they're like, well, no, this is actually like a year ago. I'm like, where do you guys want to go for like summer? They're like, we're not really sure. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, these are our target dates. Find a place and we'll go. So they dragged their feet. They didn't pick anywhere. We didn't go. Most parents were like, well, now I'm going to take charge and I'm going to pick this. They learned a valuable lesson. Like, we can be part of this sort of experience and actually put our input in, and our input will be heard and actioned, or we can just kind of fall back and say, we'll figure it out. They did no research. They had some ideas. I'm like, well, what about this or what about that? And I'm like, yeah, it's all good. Supply me with stuff, tickets, planning, hotels. You guys are, 14 and 16. Like, let's do this. They didn't do it. They don't get to go. I mean, if you don't show up for work, same sort of things. You're not going to get paid. If you are supposed to, execute a certain task and you don't, there could be second and third order effects that could be pretty negative. I think with my two boys, I always didn't necessarily want to teach them what to think, but more importantly, how to think, how
Sure.
to go from point A to point B, how to solve their own problems and be curious. More importantly, be accountable for their actions. Um, if you mess up, own it, move on. Like, it's not the end of the world. My oldest boy, he came upstairs maybe about 3 months ago with a project. Said, Dad, what do you think? I'm like, that looks horrible. He's like, you really think it looks horrible? I'm like, what do you think? He's like, yeah, it does. I totally rushed it. Went downstairs, fixed it. What do you think now? I'm like, 100% better. Like, instead of being like, well, I don't know. What do you think we could do? It's like, just be a man. Like, that's how you're going to be talked with and chatted with in any sort of job. Like, hey, boss, what do you think about my project? Well, you messed up here, 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 and here, but this looks great. Well, just cut to the chase.
Yep.
Give them it's like the bluff. You ever heard of the bluff?
Now tell me the bluff.
Bottom line up front.
Cool, cool. Oh, love
You
this.
know,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I give it to my boys. I won't. They asked me not to discuss some of the more embarrassing things that they have done, but like when it comes to like sex or it comes to like different words that they would hear at school, they'd be like, "Hey, Dad, what is this?" And I'd be like, "Well, let me tell you what it is." Blah blah blah, and I would just kick out whatever it was. And they'd be like, "Whoa, what the heck?" I'm like, "So do you think the other 13-year-old kid that's saying that had that really happen to him?" No. I'm like, all right. But I found it very important to be very honest with my boys. You know, I drink in front of them. I don't drink a lot, but I'll have a beer in front of them because I want me to be the example on this is how, if you want to have a beer, this is how you do it. You don't go out and tie one on with there's a time and a place. But when we're here, I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to eat my food and I'm going to have this beer because that's what I am as a man. This is how you responsibly do it. When we're driving in a car, radio's down, phones are down, because this is what it is. If I lead by that example, they should have no rhyme or reason that they have never been taught or shown or told the right way to do something. Even when my oldest was cutting the grass at 9 years old, he'd cut the grass. I'd show him how to do it. He'd push it a couple times. Before you know it, he takes over. He wraps it up. Dad, I'm done with the grass. I'm like, all right, well, let's go take a look. I'm like, you missed a spot here. You missed a spot here. He can go, ah, or he does that once and he knows, all right, well, go finish it off, right? Finish strong, finish it 100%. The second, third, fourth, every time since then, he gets down on a knee, looks for those little spikes of grass that he missed, cutting.
Yep.
But it's a learning process. As soon as we take away the opportunities to learn and experience hardship and to experience some sort of not conflict but truthfulness and how you deal with other adults, they're losing out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love the acronym BLUFF as a fatherhood tool and just a fellow human tool. And even in our shared capacities as leadership guides in the world in different arenas a bit or whatever, but it's like it's always imperative to make sure you actually know the bottom line. Like if I'm going to communicate something to you, it's like above
Yeah,
all else, what do I want you to know? So bottom line up front, bluff,
that's it.
game on.
Bluff.
So I was thinking about you. You said you're traveling to South America. You lived in Japan. You on assignment saw different aspects of the world, lived with different cultures, and I'm I'm dying to know what is your sense of what is universal about fatherhood around the world? Did you get a good vantage on it to the degree where you could say, what's timeless and universal about fatherhood is A, B, and C? What's your
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I think from my time in the Middle East and in Africa, even way up in the Canadian Arctic Northern Circle, um, the the idea is that when you are a father and you have children or sons or daughters, there is a huge there's a huge kind of difference between what we have in America and really what the rest of the world has. And I will use my recent trip to living with the Maasai, where we would wake up in the morning and 8, 9, 10-year-old little boys would walk out with goats and cattle and sheep and tend to these things with a rungu, which is a throwing club, um, and hyenas, lions, leopards, all these things are out there, and they're tending to it while the men are sitting back having their morning chai and then eventually join them. There's some big differences, but the one thing that is kind of like universal is that there is a sense of pride in like when a father is looking at his children. It's a love, it's a joy, it is something that no matter where you're at in life, when you know that those are your children, your sons, and they're one day going to grow up and do great things, like there's just this constant and common like essence of like, yes, I've got kids, these guys are absolutely great and they're going to do great things. That is the goal, but now it's my responsibility to help usher them along that path. From many folks I met in the Middle East that had kids, is they're doing their part to make sure that their kids can have a better future. People in the Maasai, people in the Amazon and the Arctic, that father loves them. They're proud. They're super stoked that those are their kids and they're going to do great things. But they also realize that they are a huge factor in there, meaning that all these fathers are present. They're there with them. They're teaching them. They're coaching them. They're mentoring them. They're giving them guidance, and whatever the cultural practice or lifestyle they might be part of, they are present and they are there. And I think for any father today to raise the best child is you have to be present. You have to be part of that child's life. That child can't be your life. You hear parents say, "Oh my God, I live for my kids. This is all that I do. They're my everything." Well, absolutely. Children are everything to parents, but you also have to do your own and be your own. Eventually, that rolls into what's called an enmeshed family, and it's a very toxic sort of environment where a child grows up under the thumb of a parent and can only do things into their 20s, 30s, and 40s without the approval of a parent. It's a very dangerous place. Um, so we want to avoid that, but you can't have a parent that says, "My whole life is my children." Well, what about your life? That's a horrible example to live and to have for a child where doesn't mom have any interest or dad have any interest? No, it's only you. It's not the best, but these cultures all around the world, proud of their kids. They are the example and they are continuing forward, making sure that, you know, they grow up and continue on.
Yeah, and thrive.
Thrive.
Like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it comes back to that notion of equipping them to, be responsible, hardworking, focused, independent, and have some autonomy. So it reminds me of what you told me on the phone. You brought it up today as well. It's like you want to share who you are and your passions,
Mhm.
your realm, but your kids cannot be you. They can be
Yes.
anybody else.
Anybody else?
Anybody else, but they cannot be you. And that's like literally impossible for them to be exactly you. And it's also you're making sure that they understand the expectation is that they become their true selves and
Yeah.
uncover that,
Yeah.
discover that, find
Bingo.
out who that is.
Yeah.
Um, and I had asked you early on. We've covered a lot of this, but I had asked you what you would say it means to be a legendary father, and you said unconditional love. That
Yeah.
feels like a timeless, universal thing across cultures. Teach them how to think and not what to think. That
Yeah.
might be universal as well. And to lead by example.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Leadership, leadership by example is probably the most important thing. You know, the, little kids will emulate their parents. They will emulate their father. They will mirror them. They will do the exact. I mean, you see videos across the board where a dad is sitting with their 1 year old son on the couch, and football game goes on. He throws his hands up. He sees him and throws his hands up. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
they are very aware, and everything you do, uh, positive or negative, they are absorbing that sort of information. I'll put it to you like this: I'm divorced. I've been divorced, and it'd be so very easy for me to talk negatively about their mother. We co-parent. We have a creation contract that will never go away. But that is a horrible example for how a man is to talk about a woman and think about a woman. More importantly, their mother.
Their mother.
That is leading by example. When we have conversations or we do certain things, I have led by example, opening a door, for people walking in, to the point where, I could be, boys and I could be picking up some like takeout Mexican food somewhere. Someone could be walking out the door and they hold the door open. That's not something where I'm like, you will hold the door open for everybody. They've seen me do it. They do it. And it's like, why? Because it's dad, and it's the right thing to do. It is the best form of teaching, is just to do the right things, lead by example, and they will emulate that. They will mirror that. They will use that as part of their foundations going forward. Like, man, I could give you so many examples where, like, my youngest, he's a little bit more of a brawler, but there were some kids maybe like 2 years ago that were picking on this other kid, and like, I told him, I say, you fight. Like, fighting is important. You should never wait to get punched. You just, if it is a point where violence is going to happen, you create that violence within reason, but do not be afraid to defend somebody else or yourself. In this world today, you have to be very quick. You have to think. Don't go looking for a fight, but never be afraid to step in and do the right thing. Like, we call that discipline, doing the right thing when nobody else is looking. Some kid was getting picked on. He stepped in. Kid swung in. He got in an altercation, and then brought that kid back home. And then the mom came over and was like, "Thank you so much. Your son did this." And I'm like, "Come on, good job." Not like a high five or anything, but like, he went inside and he's like, "Are you mad?" I'm like, "What have I told you? To defend folks and to, throw the first punch." And I'm like, "That's right. Why would you wait to get hit?" It sounds very weird. I know in this day and age, a lot of parents are like, you shouldn't fight. I'm like, you should. You are a young man. You will be challenged in many different ways. And if you know the highest capacity of that challenge, a physical altercation, you'll realize how to bring those altercations down to a much lower level, whether it's just talking or walking away from the situation. But if you don't know how to do these things, do it. Why? Because I was a fighter as a kid. I got in all sorts of fights, and I've used my fights as, this was a dumb one. This one was necessary. This was a war. This was a random guy at a gas station that tried to mug you. Lead by example, whether it's, everything and anything. That's a weird one, but you know,
No, you're right.
I
The
mean,
the world the world it's like in vogue to be hypersensitive about everything in the world. So,
yeah,
whatever. I'm not worried about that. That's not going to serve anybody in the grand scheme of things, and it's not quite in touch with reality. And I've heard
yeah,
this notion. I'm trying to remember. I'm sure it's been attributed to a number of people, but I want I want to think of myself. I would rather have someone be a highly dangerous, uh, uh, capable person that can control that than a weak person
bingo.
who happens to have, the chance to manipulate someone. So I'd rather be dangerous and aware of it and a steward of it than weak and, off the cuff or off the rock.
Exactly.
Exactly, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Grand finale question for Donny
All
Dust.
right. Oh shit.
So,
Gosh.
I mean, the podcast that I'm building here, it's all about adventure, leadership, raising legends. You you're nailing all three of those, I feel like, you know. Adventure is baked into your essence. You're leading your kiddos by example. They sound like they're going to be highly capable. They're already highly capable, and they're gonna they have a really good chance of being legendary kiddos. It sounds like great.
Yeah.
I want you to picture this decades from now. You're not in the
Decades.
room. You're not around. Maybe you've moved on, and your two boys are sitting around a campfire. They're there with perhaps their boys, maybe even their grandchildren, and they're weaving tales about their father. What are the three things you hope you're known for? Acknowledging you could be known for a lot. Donny Dust has the story of a lifetime
Oh,
in his
jeez.
back pocket. Don't get me wrong. But for you, as a man, as an
Yeah.
individual, as a father, what do you hope you're known for? What tales are they telling? Three things.
Oh man. Well, I think the first thing I'm known for living as being their dad, that there was unconditional love and acceptance into who they were. And more importantly, who they were from a young kid and how it's morphed and changed into where they're at next to that campfire. Because adaptation, changing is good. Dad never judged. He always accepted, always loved us for who we were. I think they would also probably share that their dad was probably the craziest person when it came to pushing the limits on on his own personal safety in the natural world. Like, and they would probably go into stories about learning that there's a blizzard coming in Colorado, and he gave us a hug goodbye and then walked into the mountains for the duration of the blizzard just to see if he could make it out alive. Um, I think that would definitely be a story, along with stealing a mule deer from a mountain lion to get the back straps out to eat it because he was hungry. There'd be a lot of stories. I'll put it to you like this. But
Yeah.
unconditional love and always accepting of us. He always gave us the why to the questions that we would have had. He always gave us truth and honesty to everything and anything that we could have asked. He was honest and always gave the bottom line up front. And more importantly, I think that he learned these things from his experiences in the military, from his dad, and from his grandfather. And these will carry on to all of you sitting at this campfire.
Hey, oh, hey, oh.
I,
I love that. That's fantastic.
right on.
Yeah, I love
Right
the
on.
second one. Like, Dad was the ultimate nonconformist.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
looked that cougar in the eye and he said, "Those backstraps are mine." I need to know that
They
story.
are
I want to
mine,
sit
man.
around a campfire
That
with
was,
you. I
oh,
want to hear
man.
more about that someday.
Yeah,
Donny Dust, thank you so much for your time. Uh,
for sure.
and I just hope the listeners appreciate the conversation as much as I did. In a way, I don't even care if anyone listens to these podcasts because I get so much myself out of them. And it just so happens that I get to put them out into the universe and the ripple effect gets to, do its thing. So thanks for your time. I'll see you on the next one and let's hang out soon. I got
Yeah,
some
man.
ideas for us. We're going to do some
No,
things together.
absolutely. I appreciate it. And more importantly, I wish this podcast existed when I was trying to adapt and figure out what it was to be a dad. Because I've listened to several of these episodes, even at 44. Yes, I'm 44 with an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. I'm still learning. I'm still learning. So I applaud you. My hat goes off to you and to your wife and to Leonidas, that this is a good thing. This is what the world needs, and you are now starting to really shape future dads. So thank you so very much for allowing me to have the honor and sharing some of my stories. Much
Absolutely.
respect.
See you next time, my friend.
Indeed.
Cheers. There you have it. That's been another episode of Whoa Dad, Go Dad. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button. Subscribe to the podcast so you get the future ones. And please spread the word and post this episode to your social networks. That's powerful. Perhaps the best thing you can do is share this directly with a new dad or a soon-to-be dad that you know personally. Let them know you're rooting them on. And indeed, drop a comment and be really a part of this dialogue on fatherhood with me. Let me know in the comments a question you want me to ask other dads, or just some feedback. How does this sound to you? What's helpful? What stands out about these conversations? I would appreciate that. Until, as I grow, whoa dad, go dad. I've got many more episodes to come, and I'm so glad you're here. Looking forward to catching you on the next one.
Whoa, dad, go dad, here we go now. Oh yeah, the ultimate roll now. Oh yeah, here we go now. Whoa, dad, go.